Ariana Brooks had always believed she could read men within the first 5 minutes. The confident ones, the fragile egos, the overcompensators, the charmers. She had dated enough of each type to build an entire podcast series titled Red Flags Dressed in Rolex. But there was one man who refused to fit her usual categories, and it drove her insane. Noah Sinclair, her neighbor from 2 floors above. The one who always held the elevator door, smiled softly instead of speaking, and never once tried to flirt with her. He wasn't unattractive. In fact, he was the kind of attractive that made women turn their heads twice. Tall, lean frame, thick, dark hair, always neatly combed back, and those wire-framed glasses that screamed Stanford or MIT. But what always got to Ariana was how soft he seemed, gentle, reserved, like the type who asked permission before hugging, who apologized if he walked too close. She used to think he probably says sorry during sex. One night over drinks, her friend Tasha had said it aloud. "He's cute, sure, but he gives me weak millionaire energy." You know the type. Born into money, allergic to real emotion, probably cries after arguments. Ariana laughed at the time, but the phrase stuck with her. Weak millionaire. It fit too perfectly. Noah drove a sleek silver Tesla dressed in cashmere sweaters and always carried those fancy refillable water bottles. He looked like he worked in tech, probably had a startup or inherited one. Always calm, always composed. Like nothing in the world rattled him because nothing had ever touched him. He was the kind of man she used to avoid dating on purpose. She didn't want soft, she didn't want slow and careful, not after what she'd been through. Ariana needed fire, someone who would grab her, challenge her, push back. She thought Noah was the kind of man who would watch a woman undress with appreciation, but never dare to help. A watcher, not a doer. But sometimes when their eyes locked in the hallway, just for a second too long, she felt something shift, like there was a storm hiding behind. His soft smiles and unbothered energy, like maybe she had it all wrong. Maybe he wasn't soft, maybe he was controlled. Still, she filed him away in the mental drawer marked beautiful, but not my type. Until that night. Until the power went out in the building, and she ended up stranded outside her apartment with no key, no battery, and no one to call. Until he opened his door with sleepy eyes and bare feet, wearing only sweatpants and a half-buttoned shirt that revealed a chest she never expected. Until he said, "You can wait here if you want," in that low, steady voice she'd never heard before. And later, much later, until her body arched under his, breathless and trembling, while his name tumbled from her lips like a prayer she had never dared speak. That was when she realized softness was not weakness. It was restraint. It was power waiting for permission. It was the kind of strength that knew how to hold you without breaking you. And Noah Sinclair was not weak. He was dangerous in the most delicious way. And Ariana, she was about to learn what it meant to be undone by a man who never had to raise his voice to leave her speechless. She thought he was a weak millionaire. She was wrong, painfully, gloriously wrong. Ariana Brooks had lived in the high-rise for almost 2 years. Nestled in the heart of downtown Austin, the building catered to young professionals who had either made it or were pretending they had. With exposed concrete ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, and rent that made her parents question her financial decisions, the place screamed success, and Ariana wore success like a second skin. As a senior PR executive for a boutique agency, she had carved her place in the world with sharp heels, sharper instincts, and a refusal to let anyone see her crack. Every morning she moved through the building like a force of nature coffee, in one hand, phone in the other, already troubleshooting client crises before most people had left their beds. People noticed her, men noticed her, and she noticed them right back. She liked control, not chaos, precision, not passion. But that was before Noah Sinclair moved in. He had appeared one quiet afternoon, rolling in a single sleek suitcase and a longboard under one arm. No movers, no fanfare, just him and a key fob. Ariana saw him from the mailroom the first time, and while she could admit he was attractive, she also pegged him immediately as a soft soul in a structured world. He didn't radiate dominance or distraction. Instead, he moved like someone who had nothing to prove. He wore simple clothes, smiled at the concierge, and nodded to neighbors with the kind of relaxed politeness that almost annoyed her. And then he kept doing something Ariana wasn't used to. From men in buildings like this, he ignored her. Not rudely, not with arrogance, but with a respectful, neutral distance that somehow made her more aware of his presence. It wasn't that she wanted his attention. It was the fact that she didn't have it that made her curious. When they passed in the hallway, he always gave a soft smile or a polite nod. No lingering stares, no charming lines, no double takes, and somehow that made him more intriguing than any man who had tried to flirt with her in months. Her friends called him the quiet tech guy. After spotting his reserved demeanor at a few rooftop mixers, always sipping seltzer water instead of cocktails, listening more than talking, leaving early. No one knew exactly what he did, though rumors swirled. Someone said he'd sold an app for 8 figures. Someone else claimed he was taking a mental health sabbatical. Ariana didn't know, and she didn't ask. She observed. She noted the way he always wore those soft sweaters in neutral tones, like he didn't want to be noticed, but somehow always was. She noticed he went on sunrise jogs, came back dripping with sweat, but never in a rush. She noticed he read actual hardcover books at the rooftop pool instead of scrolling his phone. But she also noticed the way his jaw clenched sometimes when he thought no one was looking, or the slight hitch in his step, like an old injury he didn't talk about, or the way his eyes seemed to carry 1,000 stories he never volunteered. Noah Sinclair was soft, yes, but not in the way Ariana had first assumed. His softness wasn't weakness, it was choice, controlled, intentional. But Ariana didn't know that yet. She still thought he was another beautiful man with a trust fund and a therapy schedule. A man who probably hosted silent retreats and cried during Pixar movies. And she didn't have space for that, not when her life was already balanced on high-stakes campaigns and client expectations, not when her heart still carried the bruises from a love that once burned too bright and ended in ash, so she kept her distance, until the universe intervened, until a simple malfunction in the building's electrical system left her stranded outside her apartment, barefoot and damp from the rain, and the only light still on in the hallway belonged to Noah Sinclair. That was when her carefully constructed perception began to crack. That was when she realized the man upstairs was not the harmless mystery she'd written off. That was when things began to shift, not all at once, but enough to make her wonder if the version of Noah she had built in her mind was about to be completely deliciously rewritten. The hallway was colder than she expected. Ariana stood barefoot on the polished concrete arms crossed tightly over her tank top as the rainwater from her hair soaked into the thin fabric clinging to her skin. Her key fob had shorted out after the storm knocked power out on the west side of the building, and her phone, of course, had died an hour earlier. She glanced down both ends of the dimly lit corridor. Silence. Everyone else had either locked themselves inside or left for the weekend. Everyone except one. Light spilled from beneath Noah Sinclair's apartment door. A soft amber glow. She hesitated. She could wait out here and freeze or go downstairs to the lobby and hope the night concierge had a charger. But even that was a gamble. And right now, soaked cold and mildly humiliated, she just needed a moment of warmth, a place to land, just for a second. Her pride wavered. Then she knocked. It was barely a pause before the door opened. Noah stood there in gray joggers and a black t-shirt, barefoot hair damp and pushed back, like he'd just come from the shower. His eyes scanned her quickly soaked hair, bare shoulders, the tank top that now offered zero coverage, the tension in her arms. He didn't leer, he didn't smirk, just that quiet, steady gaze. Power outage, he asked. She nodded, and a dead phone, and a soaked key fob. So, I'm basically a walking disaster. His lips twitched like he wanted to smile. Come in. She hesitated just for a second, then stepped inside. His apartment smelled like cedar and citrus, clean, minimalist, masculine in a thoughtful way. Everything in his home was curated, but not forced, like he valued space as much as silence. A candle flickered in the corner, casting soft light over a shelf full of books and plants that somehow thrived without sunlight. Ariana stood in the entryway, dripping slightly onto his dark wood floors. Noah returned from the linen closet with a towel and handed it to her without a word. As she pressed it to her face and neck, she noticed the way he watched her, respectful but attentive. Like he wasn't just seeing her soaked and embarrassed, he was seeing all of it, all of her. Sorry for the intrusion, she murmured. I wouldn't have bothered you, but you're not bothering me. He cut in gently. I was up anyway. She looked at him closely. There was a calmness in his posture, a quiet strength that felt unfamiliar in all the best ways. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't trying to impress. He was just present. You always this calm when people show up half-dressed at your door, she teased, trying to fill the silence. Only when they're dripping on my hardwood floors, he replied dryly. She let out a laugh. He smiled finally, and the air shifted. A little lighter, a little warmer. Let me make you some tea, he said, already moving toward the kitchen. She followed him, wrapping the towel around her shoulders like a shawl. From behind, she noticed the breadth of his back, the way the t-shirt hugged his body, not soft, not thin, but toned, like he moved with intention, not vanity. This is a nice place, she said, eyes scanning the apartment. It's peaceful. That's the point, he said simply. Too much of my life was loud before. She tilted her head. What do you mean? He glanced at her, then back at the kettle. Work, noise, people needing things all the time. He paused, then added, sometimes silence is the only thing that feels real. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. Instead, she let herself lean against the marble counter and watch him. He moved like someone who had been forced to slow down, someone who had learned how to live on purpose. You've always been a mystery, you know, that she said quietly. You live above me, but you might as well live in another building. Maybe that's by design, he replied, setting 2 mugs on the counter. Why, she asked. He turned to her fully, then hands braced on the countertop, eyes meeting hers without flinching. Because people assume what they want anyway. I'd rather be underestimated than misunderstood. She didn't expect that, and for a moment the weight of his words settled into the space between them. Heavy, revealing, intimate. What do people assume about you? She asked. His eyes held hers. What did you assume about me? Her pulse quickened. I thought you were quiet, gentle, maybe a little fragile. And now he asked softly. She didn't answer right away. Because now she wasn't sure. Now with the storm outside and the warmth of his apartment wrapping around her like a cocoon. She wasn't sure of anything. Now I think I may have gotten it all wrong, she admitted. He stepped closer, slowly giving her space to retreat if she wanted. She didn't move. You're shivering, he said. Sit. I'll grab a blanket. She obeyed, settling onto the edge of his low couch as he disappeared into the hallway. When he returned, he draped the blanket over her legs and handed her a steaming mug. His fingers brushed hers, warm, intentional, steady. The contact made her breath hitch. She sipped the tea slowly, watching him as he sat in the chair across from her. His legs open, one arm resting casually on the back. He didn't speak, didn't fill the silence. And that silence, it wrapped around her like a second skin. You always this comfortable with strangers in your living room? She asked. You're not a stranger, he said. You're someone I've watched walk past my door for months. Always in control, always 3 steps ahead. That sounds a lot like stalking, she joked. It's not stalking. If you're hoping she knocks one day, he replied. That made her pause. Her stomach flipped. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because you weren't looking, he said. And I don't chase what doesn't want to be caught. That answer landed deep, deeper than she expected. Ariana stared into her cup, suddenly unsure of how much more she wanted to know, or how much she was ready to feel. But when she looked up, Noah's eyes were still on her, unwavering, present. She set the cup down slowly. What else did you notice? She asked, her voice lower now. You mean besides the way you always check your reflection in the elevator door before you step out? I do not, she protested. You do, he said with a half smile. Also, you wear heels even on casual Fridays. You take calls on your balcony at night, and you hum when you're stressed. Her mouth opened slightly. Wow, I pay attention, he said simply, to the people who matter. She didn't realize she was leaning forward until her knees brushed his. The blanket slipped a little, but she didn't fix it. He didn't look away. And neither did she. Say something else, she whispered. Anything. Your eyes get darker when you're hiding something, he said. And right now they're almost black. Her throat tightened. He was too close, too honest, too much. What am I hiding? She breathed. That you're tired of pretending you're fine, he replied. She let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. And what are you hiding, Noah? That I've been wondering what your name sounds like when you moan it. The air between them exploded, not literally, but the charge electric instant crackled across her skin. Her heart thundered in her chest. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. Why, because I might ask you to prove it. His jaw flexed. Ask. She hesitated for one breath. 2. Prove it. He didn't move fast. He didn't rush. He stood slowly, came to kneel in front of her, and placed both hands on her thighs right over the blanket. His grip was firm, grounding. Ariana, he said her name like a promise. She nodded once. That was all it took. His lips met hers, hot, slow, devastatingly controlled. Not the kiss of a man unsure, but of a man who had waited, calculated, known exactly how he wanted to taste her. She gasped into his mouth as his hand slipped beneath the blanket, as he pulled her closer, as she forgot every assumption she had ever made. Noah Sinclair was not soft. He was not fragile. He was heat, depth, power, wrapped in stillness. And Ariana was just beginning to drown in it. Ariana woke before the sun, her cheek pressed against Noah's bare chest, the steady thump of his heartbeat, grounding her in a reality that felt too tender to be real. The storm outside had passed hours ago, but inside his apartment, the air still held the heat of what they had shared. She didn't remember falling asleep, just the way he held her after their bodies still tangled. His palm gently tracing the length of her spine like he was trying to memorize her. She hadn't expected that. Not from him, not from the man she'd assumed was too soft for her fire. She stirred slightly, her muscles aching in places that made her smile quietly to herself. Noah's grip on her waist tightened instinctively, as though his body refused to let hers go, even in sleep. She tilted her head up, watching him in the soft glow of the early morning light. His features were relaxed lashes, resting against his cheeks, lips parted just slightly. He looked peaceful, but she remembered the way he'd moved last night. There had been nothing passive in him then. He had taken his time, had learned her rhythm like a song he already knew. The chords had touched her like she was both a question and the answer. Ariana pulled the blanket tighter around her, easing out of his embrace carefully. She padded toward the bathroom, needing a moment alone to breathe, to think, to catch up, to the way her heart was now racing in a direction she hadn't prepared for. The woman in the mirror looked different, not in any obvious way, but softer, flushed, less guarded. She washed her face, wrapped herself in one of his towels, and stepped back into the room. Noah was awake now, propped up against the headboard phone in hand hair adorably messy. When he saw her, he smiled without reservation. It was that smile that nearly broke her. Morning, he said, his voice still heavy with sleep. "Hey," she replied, climbing gently back into bed beside him. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering. "You okay?" She nodded, just overwhelmed. "In a good way, I think." He set the phone down and turned to face her fully. "You don't have to explain anything, not now, not ever if you don't want to." "But I want to," she said quietly. "You deserve that." He waited. Ariana exhaled. "I thought I had you all figured out. I really did. The quiet neighbor, the soft-spoken tech guy. I thought you were boring, maybe even weak." "I'm sorry. You don't have to be sorry," he said. "You weren't wrong. I am quiet. I am soft-spoken. I just also happen to be a man who knows exactly what he wants when it shows up at his door soaking wet and wrapped in attitude." She laughed at that, a real one, and the sound loosened something between them. "I've always chosen chaos," she admitted. "Men who burn hot and fast, who make me feel desired, but never safe. You were the opposite of that." It scared me. And now, he asked, now I think I'm starting to realize that safety doesn't mean boring, and quiet doesn't mean weak. He studied her for a long moment, then said, "I used to think the same about fire, that it was all destruction, but it can warm you too. It can save you." Ariana leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. "So what's your story, Noah Sinclair? You hide it well." He went still for a beat, then began. "I built a company in my 20s. Tech, a wellness app that got big fast, too fast. Investors wanted growth. My team wanted control. I trusted the wrong people. My best friend sold out behind my back, took code I wrote, and pitched it to another firm. My girlfriend at the time was in on it. I found out during a board meeting. Ariana inhaled sharply. Damn! Yeah, he said, his voice flat. I signed my shares over, walked away with a quiet payout and a legal agreement not to say much. But it wasn't about the money, it was the betrayal. That's why you moved here. That's why I moved anywhere. I didn't have to explain myself. She sat up slightly, her fingers tracing his forearm. You've been alone a long time. Not by choice, he said. Just safer that way. I know that logic, she whispered. I've lived it. He turned to her, their eyes locking. But you came to my door anyway, and you opened it. Neither of them said anything after that. The moment didn't need more words. It had already said enough. The next few days passed in a blur of gentle routines and quiet touches. Ariana stayed longer than she meant to each time. Morning coffee turned into late lunches. Lunches turned into lazy afternoons, reading on his couch, while his fingers brushed her knee. They didn't define what was happening. They didn't rush it, but it was real, tangible. Until Thursday evening, she had just left his apartment, her phone finally charged and pinging with overdue work notifications. Back in her own space, she found a dozen emails and a calendar reminder she'd ignored. A charity gala, one she had RSVP'd 2 months ago. She dressed quickly, slid into a silk dress, and called her car. She didn't think to mention it to Noah, not because she was hiding anything, but because she didn't think he'd care. But when she stepped into the ballroom and saw him across the room, her stomach dropped. He wasn't alone. A tall, elegant woman stood at his side, her hand on his forearm, like it belonged there. They were deep in conversation with an investor Ariana recognized. Noah hadn't seen her yet. She watched him laugh politely, head tilted slightly toward the woman, and her chest tightened. He looked like he belonged in that world, polished, professional, detached. Not like the man who had kissed her shoulders while she laughed into his neck just the night before. Not like the man who had whispered her name in the dark like it meant something. She turned on her heel and left. She didn't wait for a car. She walked 6 blocks in heels, heart-pounding throat, burning. She didn't cry. She wouldn't. Not over a man who hadn't even promised her anything. Back in her apartment, she sat on the floor of her living room, still in the dress, staring at her phone. No texts, no missed calls, nothing. By the time she fell asleep on the couch, her body curled in on itself. She had convinced herself it was all in her head. She had misread everything. He had never said the words. It was just proximity, convenience, curiosity, nothing more. The next morning, she avoided the gym, the lobby, the elevator. She worked from home. She didn't want to see him. Didn't want to see that woman again either, in case. She lived in the building too. But by noon there was a knock at her door, soft, familiar. Her breath caught. She opened it slowly. Noah stood there, no suit, no polish, just a gray t-shirt and a look in his eyes she hadn't seen before. I didn't know you'd be there, he said. I wasn't hiding anything. She's an investor. She cornered me for a photo op. Nothing more. Ariana stared at him. She had her hand on you, I didn't notice. I was too busy thinking about how much I wished you were beside me instead. Her walls began to crack again. Why didn't you text me last night? Because I figured you'd seen enough. And I didn't want to explain anything. if you'd already made up your mind. I hadn't, she admitted. I was hurt. I am hurt. But not enough to forget the way you made me feel. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then let me remind you. And before she could stop him, he kissed her, gently, firmly, like a man who had nothing to prove but everything to lose. And just like that, the storm inside her broke. She clung to him, fingers fisting his shirt, tears burning but never falling. Because this wasn't the end, it was the beginning, one built on truth, on vulnerability, on the kind of strength that didn't need to roar to be heard. Noah Sinclair wasn't soft, he was solid, and he was hers. Ariana's back hit the wall before she even realized they had moved. Noah's hands gripped her hips steady, and sure his lips moving against hers, with a hunger that felt barely restrained. It wasn't a frantic kiss, but it wasn't careful either. It was deliberate. Every angle, every breath, every press of his body into hers sent a message she could no longer ignore. He wasn't asking for space. He was claiming it. Her hands slid under his shirt palms, gliding over the heat of his skin, and he groaned low against her mouth. That sound did something to her, lit something in her that had been waiting to burn. He lifted her like she weighed nothing. Her legs instinctively wrapping around his waist as he carried her toward the bedroom, his mouth never leaving hers. Every movement was smooth, practiced, not rushed but charged, controlled chaos, and she loved it. When her back hit the mattress, he paused. Eyes locked on hers, one hand braced beside her head, the other trailing slowly down her thigh. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, voice rough, breath heavy. She shook her head, pulling him closer. "Don't you dare." His lips found her neck, and she arched beneath him, her body already trembling. Every nerve ending sparked to life as his hands explored her, reverent but unafraid. Her tank top slid up over her ribs and was gone, tossed somewhere behind him. His fingers traced her sides, his palms grounding her as his mouth moved lower, tasting her skin like it was something sacred. She gasped, hands threading through his hair as he kissed down her stomach, slow and purposeful. When he looked up at her from between her thighs, her breath caught in her throat. There was something in his eyes, focused desire, devotion, that made her forget how to breathe. "You're beautiful," he said, like it wasn't just a compliment, but a truth he needed her to believe. Then he lowered his mouth to her, and Ariana forgot everything, her name, her rules, her pride. All of it melted under his tongue. He moved with patience and precision, coaxing moans from her lips that she didn't even recognize as her own. Her hands gripped the sheets, her thighs trembled around his shoulders, and when she finally came, she cried out his name like a prayer. Noah didn't stop. He kissed her inner thighs, gently hands, still stroking her sides, letting her ride the waves of pleasure as long as she needed. Then he kissed his way back up her body, slow and steady, until he was hovering above her again. "You okay?" he whispered, brushing a damp strand of hair from her cheek. She nodded, eyes glassy, lips parted. More than okay. He kissed her again, deep and slow, before pushing his pants down with one hand. When she felt the weight of him press against her, her breath caught again. He was thick, heavy, hot, and her body welcomed him like he belonged there. When he entered her, it wasn't with a rush. It was a claiming, a connection, a filling she hadn't realized she craved. She gasped, her hands clutching his shoulders as he sank deeper, stretching her, grounding her, anchoring her to the moment. "Noah," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I know," he said, kissing her jaw. I feel it too. He moved inside her slowly at first, each thrust deliberate building rhythm, like a song only they knew. Her legs wrapped around his waist, tighter, drawing him in, urging him deeper. She met his movements breath-syncing with his heartbeat, thundering against his chest. It wasn't just sex. It wasn't just bodies colliding. It was something deeper, intimate, raw. And she felt every second of it. His name left her lips again and again, each time more desperate, more reverent. He responded with groans that vibrated against her skin, his hands gripping her hips, his mouth worshipping every inch he could reach. He fucked her like he had something to prove, not about himself, but about what she meant, about how wrong she had been to think he was weak. He was everything but. His body moved with power, his focus never wavering his pace, building until she couldn't hold back anymore. Her climax ripped through her like a tide, and she cried out, nails digging into his back body, arching beneath his. He followed seconds later, burying himself deep, groaning her name against her neck as he came. They lay tangled together, sweaty and breathless hearts racing in sync. Neither of them spoke. There were no words for the way it felt, for the way he held her after, for the way she clung to him, like letting go might shatter the fragile thing they had just created. When her breathing finally slowed, she whispered, "I didn't know it could be like this." He kissed her forehead softly. Neither did I. They stayed that way for a long time, limbs tangled to silence stretching between them like a warm blanket. Outside the city moved on cars, honking sirens, wailing, life continuing. But in that room everything was still, real, present. And for the first time in what felt like years, Ariana let herself feel safe. She let herself believe. Noah shifted slightly, brushing his fingers along her arm. Stay. The word was soft, but the meaning behind it was loud. She didn't answer with words. She just curled closer. Hours passed. The sun rose higher. At some point, they ordered food, ate half of it, and then ended up back in bed, unable to keep their hands off each other. The second time was slower, more exploratory. They laughed between kisses, touched each other like they were learning a language with their skin. Noah whispered things that made her blush, and Ariana said things she'd never said to anyone before. He made her feel seen, not just desired, not just beautiful, but understood. And she didn't want to lose that, not again, not this time. As dusk settled outside, she sat curled in his oversized hoodie on the balcony sipping wine while he wrapped an arm around her waist. "What are we doing?" she asked eventually, her voice soft. "Whatever we want," he said. "But what if I want something real? Then we'll build it. Brick by brick, day by day." She looked at him, her heart, full her body, still humming. "You sure you're not too soft for all this?" He chuckled, pulling her onto his lap. "Soft men don't make you scream like that." Her eyes widened and she smacked his shoulder. "You're lucky I like you." "I'm lucky you knocked on my door," he said. And just like that, something inside her shifted again. The kind of shift you feel in your bones. Like everything before was a rehearsal. And this, whatever this was finally the real thing. The next morning came quietly with golden light, streaming through Noah's curtains, and the soft rustle of sheets as Ariana stirred. She reached across the bed for him, but her hand met only empty linen. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the warmth of the room, the scent of cedar still lingering from the night before. For a brief moment, panic whispered at the edges of her thoughts, but then she heard it dishes clinking low jazz, humming from a speaker. She rose-slipped on the oversized hoodie, still draped across a chair, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. There he was standing at the stove, back turned to her bare feet on the tile hair-tousled shirt, hanging slightly off his shoulder. Something about the sight made her pause in the doorway. She had never seen this version of domestic intimacy before. A man fully present moving through her morning as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You're cooking," she asked, voice husky with sleep. He turned and smiled. "You eat right." She grinned and stepped closer, letting her fingers brush his lower back as she passed. "Only when I'm trying to impress someone. You impress me just by showing up," he said, plating scrambled eggs and toast. They ate at the island knees, bumping occasionally, laughter spilling into the quiet spaces. It was easy, almost suspiciously easy, and that scared her more than she wanted to admit. She had never known love that felt like peace. Her phone buzzed on the counter, dragging her out of the moment. She glanced down, eyes narrowing. A name she hadn't seen in months. Marcus, her ex. The one who had left without warning with nothing but an email and a string of unread messages. The one who had called her too much and too guarded when she finally let him in. She let the call go to voicemail. Noah saw the shift in her expression. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," she lied, setting the phone face down. "Just work stuff." But it wasn't, not really. It was a ghost clawing at the edge of her happiness. And it came back hours later, when she returned to her place to shower and change, only to find Marcus waiting by her door, leaning casually like he had a right to be there. "What are you doing here?" she asked, keeping her voice low-controlled. "I was in town," he said. "Thought I'd check in, see how you're doing." "You left me," she said flatly. "There's nothing to check." "Come on, Ari, don't be like that. Don't call me that." She snapped. "You don't get to shrink me anymore." He raised his hands. Okay, I get it. You've moved on. But I couldn't stop thinking about you." "You had 6 months to think," she replied. "I'm with someone now." "The quiet neighbor," he said, with a smirk that made her want to scream. "He doesn't seem like your type." "He is," she said, "because he listens, because he shows up." "So did I." "No, you didn't," she cut him off. "You left, without warning, without explanation. And now you think you can just show up like nothing happened." His face tightened. "I made a mistake." "Yes," she said. "And I'm done paying for it." She pushed past him and stepped inside, heart pounding. It took a full hour to stop shaking. When she texted Noah later, he didn't respond. Not right away. She tried to shake it off. Maybe he was working, maybe he was resting. But her chest grew tighter with every passing hour. And then around midnight, she heard a knock at her door. When she opened it, Noah stood there. But his face was not the soft, easy warmth she was used to. It was guarded, tense. "Marcus was outside your door today," he said. "I saw him. Heard enough to know he's not just some coworker." Her stomach dropped. "I didn't know he'd show up. I didn't invite him." "But you talked to him," Noah said, voice low. "You let him speak to you." "Because I needed closure," she said. "Because I needed to tell him it's over. For me, for real." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "You should have told me." "I was going to," she said. "I just needed time to process." "Ariana," he said, stepping closer. "I've given you space since the moment we met. I've waited for you to trust me, but I'm not going to compete with ghosts." She stared at him, throat thick. "You don't have to. He means nothing." Then show me, Noah said. Not with words, with action, with truth. She closed the distance between them, pressing her forehead to his chest. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, he said. Me too. But I'm here. And I need you to be too. They didn't make love that night. They just held each other, wrapped in blankets, breathing the same quiet air. It was more intimate than anything they'd shared before. The next morning, Ariana deleted Marcus's number. She blocked him on every platform. Then she wrote Noah a letter, a real one. On paper. She left it at his door. It said everything she hadn't found the courage to say aloud. That she had misjudged him, that she wasn't used to men who didn't need to dominate a room to hold space in her heart. That his silence was a balm, not a warning, that she was choosing him now, fully, without fear. And when he showed up at her door hours later, he didn't say a word. He just kissed her, long, deep, certain. And when he pulled back, he looked her in the eyes and said, "Then let's start again. For real this time." And she nodded, not because she was unsure, but because she had finally let go of every doubt that had ever told her she wasn't meant for something this good. Weeks passed, not in a blur, but in a steady unfolding. Each day brought something small and new, between them a deeper glance, a shared routine, a quiet night, with their legs tangled on the couch, as the city buzzed somewhere beyond the window. Ariana stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. She stopped questioning why something felt so good without chaos attached to it. Noah didn't promise her fireworks every night. He gave her steadiness, presence, honesty, and something even rarer, peace. She started keeping her toothbrush at his place. He started stocking the fridge with her favorite yogurt without being asked. They didn't call it moving in, but the boundaries blurred in the best way. One Sunday afternoon, they found themselves lying in bed, sunlight pouring through the sheer curtains. Ariana had just laughed at something. He whispered, her head resting on his chest, one hand tracing lazy circles across his skin. "You still think I'm weak?" he asked, his voice soft, teasing. She smiled, kissed the spot just above his heart, and whispered, "You're the strongest man I know." He let that sit between them for a while, then said, "You know what the hardest thing was after everything fell apart for me? After the betrayal, the money, the isolation." She looked up, what believing I was still capable of being loved. Not just admired, not needed, but truly loved. Her breath caught. She knew that feeling too well. "You are," she said simply, "and not just by me." He looked at her eyes, vulnerable, in a way that made her chest ache. "I don't want to lose this. You won't," she promised. "Not as long as you keep showing up. I'll meet you every time." They didn't need grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Their love lived in the little things, in the way she folded his hoodie on the edge of his bed after wearing it all day, in the way he rubbed her feet when she was too tired to ask, in the way he whispered her name like it was a secret he was lucky to keep. One evening as they walked back from the grocery store, hands full and fingers intertwined, Ariana paused under the amber glow of the street lamp. "I spent years thinking love had to be loud," she said, "explosive, messy, toxic even. But this, what we have, it's quiet, strong, steady, and I never knew I could want something like that." Noah set the bags down and cupped her face. "You're not too much," he said. "You never were. You were just too real for people not ready to see you." Her eyes welled, but she didn't look away. "You see me now," he nodded. "I always did." That night, they didn't make love to prove anything. They did it to seal something sacred. No more assumptions, no more ghosts. Just two people who had finally stopped running from what they both deserved. In the quiet afterward, Ariana whispered, "I think I love you." Noah kissed her shoulder, held her tighter, and said, "I know, and I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, wrapped in warmth, trust, and the kind of strength that doesn't need to roar to be heard, she finally understood what it meant to be loved without fear. Not for who she could be, but exactly as she was. Because sometimes the softest touch carries the greatest power. And sometimes the man you think is weak turns out to be the only one strong enough to hold all the parts of you others were too afraid to touch.